Darkness clung to Castle Black like damp wool, the kind that never dried no matter how fiercely the hearths were stoked. Jon Snow stood alone atop the wall, gloved hands wrapped around the cold stone merlin, breath pluming in ragged clouds. It was past midnight, the moon a broken coin above a sea of ice. The wind howled, a wolf denied entry. Tomorrow. No, later today. He would face a choice no bastard of Winterfell had ever been meant to face. Stannis Baratheon's parchment lay folded in his cloak, edges stiff with frost. Not a royal decree this time, but a promise murmured in the king's brooding voice. Accept my offer. Become Jon Stark. Nay, king in the north by right of your father's blood, and we shall break the Boltons together. The words had echoed all evening in Jon's skull as he took inventory of stores, inspected the new recruits, listened to Sir Elazar's barbed complaints. Yet even Ghost sensed the change. The direwolf paced restlessly far below, hackles bristling at unfamiliar scents carried on the night air. Jon closed his eyes, letting the gale buffet him. He heard Castle Black breathing, ice settling, ropes creaking, brothers snoring behind battered shutters. For years, this place had been his refuge, a wall of duty that kept the turmoil of his blood at bay. To leave it, even to save the north, felt like prying the night's watch vows from his chest, ribs splintering with the effort. But could he cling to Black when the snows swallowed the realm of his birth? Footsteps crunched behind him. Melisandre appeared, scarlet robes snapping in the wind, copper hair turned dark by moonlight. Her ruby glimmered, casting faint embers across the ice. "The hour is late, Lord Commander," she said softly, the title curling like smoke. "Yet you do not rest." Jon kept his gaze on the horizon where the sky kissed the forest. Rest is a luxury, one we've little of, one you soon may reclaim. South of the wall, in a castle of gray stone, beneath banners argent and dire, he exhaled. "You see too much, my lady." "Not I. The flames." She tilted her head. "They showed me the crowned wolf of the north, a white wolf, bleeding into the snow, then rising crowned in blue flame." The halls of Winterfell rang with northern voices, Mormont and Cerwyn, Umber and Manderley. They knelt. "Then prophecies burn more men than they save. So does doubt." Her smile barely touched her eyes. "Stannis waits for your answer. He will march at dawn." Jon remembered the king's grim face in the solar, jaw set like iron. "I will not kneel to lords too craven to declare for me," he had said, "but I will acknowledge the North's own son. Become its king, and the North will flock to us both. Without you, they hide behind their hearths, whispering of Boltons and worse." Jon's fingers tightened on the stone. "If I accept, I break my vows. You keep the greater oath, to defend the realm of men, to leave children in their beds instead of on a Bolton flaying rack." Melisandre's voice softened. "The old gods called you from the day your first breath misted the air of Winterfell. They did not name you for cloisters of ice." He opened his mouth, but words fled. The wind gusted, scattering fresh flakes like shards of glass. Somewhere to the east, Ghost howled, long, mournful, a question and an answer folded together. Melisandre withdrew, robes whispering. "The king rides with dawn. Choose before the light finds you, Jon Snow." She vanished down the stair. Silence crept in again, save for Jon's heartbeat, steady as a drum at war. He pictured Robb's crown, the bronze circlet with iron direwolves gnashing along its brow, lost in the twins' slaughter. Robb had carried their father's hopes, and the North's love, and died all the same. Was another king what the North needed? Or a brother who had bled in wildling raids, shivered through winters on the wall, known the value of every sack of barley? Below, men of the Night's Watch slumbered. Brothers, but they were fewer than yesterday, and fewer still tomorrow. Cotter Pike's raven spoke of raiders slipping through Eastwatch's shadows, of giants stirring beyond the then's ruins. The world did not slow. Vows alone could not hold it together. Choices must. Jon turned and descended the icy ladder, boots crunching with deliberate weight. The long night's corridor smelled of pitch and torch, of old cloves some steward had hung in a futile bid against rot. He passed empty bunks, each an echo of a fallen brother. I will not abandon them, he whispered, startling himself with the conviction. But I may serve them better another way. His chambers were small, a narrow bed, a chest of maps, the sword Longclaw across antler hooks. A fire guttered low. Jon unlaced his cloak, draping it over the chair Ghost often stole for napping. The direwolf was there now, red eyes bright in the shadows. He rose, padded over, and pressed a cold nose against Jon's palm. What would you have me do? Jon murmured. Ghost's tail swept once, white against black stone. You'd tear Bolton's for supper. Sleep eluded him. He poured a measure of watered wine, then paced until the cup emptied. Dawn's first gray stained the shutters when he strode to the door and flung it wide. Air cut his cheeks. Ravens cawed restless in their cages. In the yard, Stannis soldiers saddled horses, iron-shod hooves striking sparks on flagstones. The king himself stood alone near the gate, dark cloak snapping, expression carved from granite. Davos hovered a respectful pace behind, gloves tucked under one arm. Jon crossed the yard. Brothers paused at the spectacle, the Lord Commander striding toward a king whose banner bore a flaming heart. Even Sarah Leeser stopped, straw fork halfway to the midden heap. Your Grace, Jon said, voice steady, though his insides felt molten glass. He knelt, crunch of ice loud. I would answer your offer. Stannis looked down, eyes blue as winter's heart. Well, I accept. For the North, for Winterfell, for those flayed by Bolton knives. I accept, if you'll have me. Davos' breath left him in a white cloud. Stannis' gauntleted hand rested on Jon's shoulder. Rise, Jon Stark, he declared. Rise, King of the North. The yard rang with astonished murmurs. Some joyous, some fearful. Night's Watch brothers shifted, oath-breakers by proximity. But Jon rose nonetheless. He felt taller, though the air seemed thinner, the dawn colder. I must speak to my men, he said. Do so swiftly, Stannis replied. Winter marches faster than kings. Jon crossed to the common hall. The Iron Throne of Knights had not prepared him for what awaited. Inside, benches filled with black-clad brothers. Word ran ahead of him like wildfire. Marsh, Yarwick, Locke, even Dolorous Ed stared up. Jon climbed the dais used for instruction. His hands did not tremble. My brothers, he began, and every face turned. You know my love for this order. It has been my life, yet the North burns. Ramsay Bolton skins our kin, Robert Glover's children flee into snow. Mage Mormont's bannermen hang from pikes. Stannis Baratheon offers more than crowns. He offers swords and justice. I have taken oath to shield the realms of men. I believe the shield must now be carried south. Murmurs rose. Bowen Marsh stood. Your oath forbids crowns. You would turn cloak for bronze and iron? I turn cloak so that none of you need to, Jon said. I will not ask the Watch to march. I resign my command. His chest tightened. I leave my black cloak behind. Silence, heavy as snowfall. Ed Tullet's eyes were pools of sorrow. You'll always be one of us, Jon, he said quietly. If the wall falls, I will return. That is my vow. Jon unpinned the black cloak at his throat and draped it across the dais rail. It felt like shedding skin. Outside, Stannis waited. Jon emerged, White Wolf at his heels. A cheer rose from Northmen in Stannis' service who witnessed the sight. A Stark reborn. Mount, Stannis commanded. Jon swung into the saddle of a shaggy gray courser lent by the king. Ghost bounded ahead, snow puffing. Trumpets sounded. Gates groaned open. The party rode south down the King's Road, hooves drumming a heartbeat against frozen earth. Dawn broke. Sunlight spilled on ranks of pine. Rivers veined in ice. Jon's breath fogged before his face, but inside something warmed, an ember long cold now catching. Yet unease stirred beneath. Night's Watch eyes followed his retreating column. At Raven's camp, Stannis' host would gather, banners of flint and Karstark fluttering. But the Boltons held Winterfell, and winter was crueler than banners. Davos Seaworth drew abreast. "You did it what needed doing," the Onion Knight said. "The North will answer a Stark's call sooner than a Baratheon's demand." "If they still remember us," Jon muttered. "Oh, they remember." Davos' grin was rueful. "Hells. I'm not of the North and I remember." They rode in silence a while, breath clouding, saddle leather creaking. Jon's mind returned to Ghost racing ahead, to memories of Nymeria bounding across Godswood moss, to Robb's laughter in Winterfell's yard. His course bent toward ghosts as much as kings. Near midday, they crested a ridge overlooking Queenscrown's ruins. Smoke twisted from broken chimneys. A ragged band of wildlings had taken shelter. Jon's reins tightened. He recalled Ygritte's grin amongst those stones, her last words. "You know nothing, Jon Snow." The ache flared fresh. Would she have followed him as king? Or mocked the notion of kneeling men and flayed skins when the true enemy wore no face? "Leave them," Stannis ordered. "We've no time for strays." Jon watched crows wheel over the keep, black droplets on a gray sky. He spurred on. Camp that night lay beneath towering spruces. Tents shook beneath the mounting wind. Jon shared none. He walked the perimeter, cloak snapping, ghost padding, silent. Fires danced, casting red on rings of steel. Northmen eyed him with mingled reverence and curiosity. Some bowed heads, others offered mugs of hot ale. "Your Grace," one said, a grizzled man with the Mormont bear on his sleeve, "Winterfell will open its gates when you bang the iron at dawn." Let us hope the iron bangs loud. Jon stayed his march only when dawn tickled the treetops. Sleep, still a stranger, slipped further away. They reached Ryefields 2 days later. Scouts rode in with dire news. Bolton patrols ranged 20 leagues out, skin-clad and hungry. "Bastards' boys," they called them. Veterans of Dreadfort hunts. Any rider captured lost ears or worse. Stannis summoned council inside a sagging long hall. Torches hissed in cramped gloom. Northern chieftains gathered. Arnulf Karstark, his smiles thin as a drawn blade. Justin Massey with his golden hair. Lyanna Mormont's Uncle Gerald, shoulders knotted like pine roots. Melisandre stood apart, eyes half-lidded. "The bastard of Bolton will not meet us in open field," Stannis said. "He clings to Winterfell's walls. We must draw him out or starve him in." Jon studied the map, finger following the sweep of ice-choked rivers. The Boltons hold Moat Cailin's remnants, but the ironmen they placed are few. A swift strike could cut their supply lines from the south. Arnulf Karstark nodded. "You forget the Freys festering at the Twins. They have hogs enough to feed 100 winters." Jon's lips thinned. "Freys feed themselves first. Roose Bolton trusts no man, not his blood." Stannis' eyes narrowed. "Then we set a snare. Break their foraging parties. Send word to Manderley at White Harbor. Tell him a Stark calls for his banners at last." Heads dipped. Hope flickered like torchlight. Jon leaned forward. "We must move before snow buries the causeways. The northern fleet of White Harbor can ferry grain upriver if iced to provisions. Manderley's galleys will need escort. Bolton scouts may sabotage the docks." Stannis looked pleased. "You've spent your nights thinking strategy, I see." "My nights and days." Council adjourned. Men shuffled into cold dusk, voices hushed like worshippers leaving sept. Jon emerged last, only to find Melisandre waiting near the door. "You stand taller with each passing hour," she observed. "The crown suits." "There is no crown yet. Invisible, perhaps. Yet every man here sees it." He met her eyes squarely. "You saw a white wolf crowned in blue flame. Flames lie. Wolves do not. A crown is a crown, whether shaped from gold or fire." Her smile widened. "But beware the ice that seeks to quench." Jon walked away before she could say more, heart drumming too fast for comfort. Ghost brushed against his leg, growled low at the red woman until she vanished among tents. That night, snowfall thickened. Drifts swallowed breastworks, muffled every clank of mail. Jon dozed fitfully in Stannis' command tent, wrapped in furs. He dreamed of wolves stalking halls of limed stone, of Sansa weaving crowns from daisy stems, of his father watching from beneath the heart tree, eyes sorrowful as falling leaves. Morning broke beneath a ceiling of pewter cloud. Scouts reported a small party approaching, 3 horsemen bearing white flags. They entered camp under wary crossbows. Jon stood with Stannis at the central fire when the visitors dismounted. One wore Bolton's sigil, the flayed man. Another bore Frey colors. The third, cloaked in gray, bore no badge. The Frey, sour-faced, intoned stiffly. Ramsay Snow, true-born Bolton by decree of His Majesty Tommen Baratheon, Lord of Winterfell, sends terms. A hush fell. Men spat at the name. State them, Stannis growled. Lay down arms, depart the north, and the so-called King Stannis will be granted safe passage to the wall. All traitors who followed him shall be flayed. The Frey licked lips. The bastard, Jon Snow, shall be returned to Winterfell in irons, there to answer for crimes against Lord Roose. Jon felt heat flood his cheeks, Ghost bared teeth behind him. Bolton envoy smirked. Lord Ramsay pledges the direwolf will be flayed last. So Snow may watch. The camp erupted. Swords rang free. Curses flew. Stannis raised a hand, silencing his men. "And what does your lord offer for his own hide?" the king asked. The Frey laughed until he saw Stannis' eyes. His voice faltered. "My lord? Mercy?" Jon stepped forward, voice icier than wind. "You will ride back and tell Ramsay Snow this. A Stark is come again, and Winterfell shall know justice. Hide behind your father's walls while you can." The envoy swallowed. "Is that your answer?" Jon stared at the man, as though through a crossbow sight. "It is a promise." Stannis waved a dismissive hand. "Go. Warn your master winter comes for him." They rode out in near silence. Snowflakes tumbled thick. Jon exhaled and watched his breath fade. Around him, men murmured variations of the same sentiment. At last, a Stark's wrath. Plans quickened. Massey proposed night sorties. Mormont pledged scouts through the Wolfswood. Jon conferred with Davos on river crossings and with Arnulf on fords near the Dreadfort. In quiet hours, Jon wrote letters, summons sealed with direwolf sigil borrowed from an old Mormont signet. One to Lady Barbary Dustin at Barrowton, promising justice for Eddard's bones. One to Lady Dustin's rival Lady Flint, recalling shared blood. 3 to mountain clans, invoking the honor of House Stark. Each message bore the same core. A Stark lives. Rise, didn't. Raven after raven flapped into pale skies, wings beating like drums. Jon watched them go, each a thread binding him closer to the north. With every black shape dwindling over treetops, he felt his night's watch vows drift further. But the weight upon his shoulders only grew. 7 nights after the envoys departed, Jon stood over the map again. Davos opposite. Flicker of torch revealed the Onion Knight's lined face. "We must risk the causeway," Jon said. "Strike east to Moat Cailin, cut the Boltons from the neck. Greywater Watch may ally if Howland Reed lives." Davos tapped the marshlands with a calloused finger. "If we get bogged, Ramsay could sally, catch us hampered. Then we draw him first. A feint. Perhaps a raid on the Dreadfort's granaries. Bold. Necessary." Dawn saw columns form. Horns load. Jon rode at Stannis' flank under a white banner bearing the snarling direwolf. Snow blinded the world. Flakes the size of sigils. Yet the host advanced, crunching through drifts, breath steaming like chimneys. Jon's thoughts scattered like crows. Memories of Winterfell's hot pools, of Arya sparring Bran, of Cailin's quiet smile the first day she allowed him at table. All ghosts rode with him. 2 days' march south of the wall. Scouts reported a Bolton outrider column tracking them. Night fell violet. Fires were forbidden. Men huddled quiet, eating hardtack, warmth a memory. Jon patrolled with Ghost, through the hush, senses sharpened by dread. Something moved in tree-lined shadows, too tall for a man. Ghost growled, but the silhouette melted into dark. "Giants," Jon whispered. "Or worse," said a voice behind him. Melisandre, appearing as though from snow itself. "The cold things wake." Jon stiffened. "You've seen them, your fires?" More than flames now. I feel them in the wind. They stir because you stir, Jon Stark. And he frowned. I am no sorcerer. But you are fire in their cold. She reached, fingertips grazing his vambrace. Ghost snarled. She retreated. Guard your life well. Many eyes covet a Stark crown. She left him with that, ruby pulsing. Jon fingered Longclaw's hilt, traced the ridges of the pommel. A damn crown weighs before it even sits, he muttered. Ghost leaned against his leg, warmth a silent oath. Days blurred. Frozen rivers crossed, supply wagons stuck, oxen prodded, Bolton outriders harried. Yet Stannis' army crept closer to Winterfell, each frost-bitten mile earned by blood and will. Jon learned the rhythms of command, when to press, when to halt, when to pour sour ale on a soldier's pride and light it into courage. Men listened. They called him Your Grace when they thought he wouldn't hear. On the 12th day of March, flurries cleared. Winterfell's towers speared the horizon, gray jags above white dales. Smoke drifted from chimneys. Too much smoke, Davos remarked. They're burning the stores. Camp spread among hills overlooking the castle. Jon stood upon a rise. Winterfell, broken by war, still looked like home. Ridge-lined towers, the first keep stump, memory shaped in stone. Steam rose faintly where the hot pools survived. Somewhere inside, Ramsay Snow mocked him. Stannis ordered trenches, palisades, Siga engines assembled. Jon saw men's shoulders sag. Winter battered them harder than any blade. Supplies dwindled. They needed allies, a spark to rally wavering houses. He thought of Manderley's galleys cutting through ice-choked waters, laden with barley and conviction. That night, Jon slipped into his tent, quill ready. He penned words to Lord Wyman. The North remembers. A true Stark stands before Winterfell. Bring your galleys, bring your songs. Free the North. He sealed it with a smear of snow-pressed wax. Sleep claimed him at last. But dreams turned stranger. He wandered Wolfston corridors, heard voices chanting of vengeance. Follow me, they whispered. He turned, chasing flickers of candle. A door of weirwood opened. Ned Stark knelt sharpening ice, though the sword gleamed longer, darker, colder. A king must temper justice, Ned said without looking up. Steel that bends may serve longer than steel that shatters. Jon reached to speak, but frost sealed his lips. Ice rose, dripping blue flame, and Ned's eyes glowed like lanterns as the blade descended. Jon woke with a start, breath ragged. Dawn glimmered. Anxious voices buzzed outside. He threw on cloak and strode out. Across snowy ground, a rider approached, bearing the trident and mermaid banner. White Harbor's colors. Davos grinned at the sight, relief carving new lines. Jon's pulse quickened. The rider dismounted, knee-deep in snow, and knelt. Lord Wyman Manderley sends greeting and bread and salt, the rider said. His fleet bears grain men, and the might of White Harbor up the white knife. He names Jon Stark king in the north and calls the banners. A roar rose from the camp, one of hunger and hope. Jon's throat thickened. He helped the rider rise, clapped gauntlet to shoulder. The victory was only a breath, but it filled lungs starved for months. Stannis approached, lips pressed thin. Word travels swiftly. He studied Jon, eyes unreadable. Your north comes, it seems. Jon said quietly. They come. Stannis nodded once. Then let winter howl. We shall answer with fire and steel. He turned to issue new orders. Jon watched him stride away, wondering if the king resented the swell of northern loyalty. Yet Stannis had offered this path. He must walk it beside him. Snowflakes swirled, but beneath the men moved faster, with purpose. Jon smelled hope. Wood smoke and oat bread, ghosts of feasts. He walked among tents, ghost, sauntering proud. A Mormont boy hammered spear points, singing a bear song. A flint woman plaited a direwolf charm from horsehair and thrust it into Jon's hand, blushing. That evening, as the first of Manderley's wagons creaked into camp, Jon stood upon a half-finished siege tower, surveying the lights of Winterfell. The castle looked smaller than memories, as if war had shrunk its bones. Yet banners of the flayed man still writhed crimson on the battlements. Fury rose in him. A tide no wall could halt. "Soon," he murmured. Below, torchlight revealed Melisandre standing motionless near the tower base, face upturned. Ruby blazing blazed. He could not read her expression. The wind carried her voice, or perhaps the memory of words. "Guard your life." Many eyes covet a stark crown. Jon closed his eyes. He felt the crown's weight already, invisible yet crushing. But he also felt Winterfell stones beneath bare feet. Smelled wolf's wood and bread baking. If he must carry the north upon his shoulders, he would. For Robb, who died a king betrayed. For Ned, who died an honest lord. For every child lost to Bolton knives. He opened his eyes and watched snow drift onto the siege tower's beam. Each flake melted on his gauntlet, small and perfect, like vows renewed. Winter might swallow kings, but the north endured. He would see it rise or fall with it. The night stretched ahead, wide as the frozen sky. Jon Snow, Jon Stark, stood between past and future, breath fogging, heart steady. Behind him men readied engines, sharpened axes, whispered to the old gods. Before him, Winterfell's walls glimmered, patient as fate. And somewhere within those walls, Ramsay Bolton prepared his own games. The war for the north had begun. Cailin, PGSQL. Dawn seeped into camp like watered wine, a thin, pallid light that found every patch of frost-crusted mail and made it glitter as though the army were clad in crushed glass. Jon woke to the smell of cedar smoke and rising bread, Manderley cooks wasting no time erecting their ovens, and to the low rumble of wagons lurching into position behind new-laid palisades. A hush of purposeful activity replaced the weary quiet that had gripped the host for days. Somewhere a horn sounded, not a call to arms, but a signal to the foragers. Fresh grain had arrived. Jon dressed quickly, fingers numb as he cinched his cloak. Outside, the makeshift streets between tents thrummed with life. Manderley men in sea-green cloaks hefted barrels from skiffs sledded over the snow. Karstark riders led shaggy mountain ponies, laden with dried venison. Smiths from Barrowton hammered out hinged plates for the siege tower's turret. The morning felt almost festive, as though the north itself had turned a page. Ghost shadowed Jon's steps, red eyes scanning every motion. That uneasy gleam had not left the direwolf since the Bolton envoy's threats. It would not leave until those threats were ended. Stannis' command pavilion sat on the rise overlooking the frozen river winter. A ring of guards flanked the entrance, Stormlanders with surcoats stiff as boards in the cold, but their steel helms bore a faint frosting, the direwolf sigil painted across each brow by some canny quartermaster. The king had decreed it at dawn. Every man would wear the wolf and heart, both. One host, he said, one purpose. Inside, the king hunched over a cleared space where the map of Winterfell sprawled. Davos, Arnulf Karstark, Gerald Mormont, and Justin Massey stood in semicircle, voices low. They looked up as Jon entered, and the Onion Knight's weather-worn face cracked into a smile. "Our bread has risen, your grace," Davos said, tapping a carved figurine of a sail. "And so has our hope." "Hope makes thin armor," Stannis replied, then gestured Jon forward. "But armor can be hammered." He fixed Jon with that hard iceberg stare. "The Manderley fleet bears 500 men, and 3 trebuchets. Not enough to batter Winterfell alone, but a beginning. Word from White Harbor also speaks of Serwyn men marching under your banner." Namawan Dakash. Jon felt a swell of pride and apprehension. "Lord Serwyn's heir is but a boy with a castle at his back," Arnulf Karstark put in, his tones oily. "Better than none." Stannis moved a wooden tower representing Winterfell an inch west, then placed a tiny direwolf on the King's Road. "Our lines close here and here. We dig trenches to funnel sortie attempts. Massey's archers guard the Godswood Gate. Mormont's men man the North Tower engines. Your own place is not merely symbolic. The North must see its king commanding. Menster. The word still jolted Jon like a cold splash. I'll stand with the front trenches at dusk, when Bolton scouts grow bold. Massey nodded approval. We've good killing ground there. Karstark gave a thin smile. And good graves if we misjudge. Stannis ignored the barb. Davos, ride south today. Meet Manderly's second column before Whitford. Escort them through the Bolton pickets. Take banners, show the wolf proudly. Now I'm in. Now, as you wish, sire. Plans spun threads through the morning. Ration allotments, watch rotations, the marriage of Manderly grain to Stormlander's salt pork in stews strong enough to thaw marrow. Jon found himself fielding a dozen questions, each small but vital. How deep must the ice pits be? Which ravens should carry which sigil to the clawmen of the mountains? Whether grey water pipers knew any marching tunes a footman could keep? With every answer he gave, men looked at him differently. Not as the quiet Lord Commander of the Watch, but as something larger, heavier, more dangerous. He broke away near noon, needing clear air. Outside the pavilion, the world glared white. Work songs rolled across the snow. Deep bass shanties from Manderly sailors. Quick yelps from free folk now sworn to Stannis. The men Tormund had sent south months past in search of bread and blood. Jon crossed to the siege tower, inspecting the new plates fitted at its throat. Each beam thrummed under hammer blows as if anxious to stride to battle itself. The craftsman in charge, an older woman from Long Barrow, white hair braided with bronze rings, saluted with her mallet. Your Grace. Tower will stand taller than Winterfell's gate by tomorrow. Jon laid a palm to the wood, felt the faint tremor of life beneath frozen sap. Shall need ribs of iron and a wolf's heart. Got both right here. The woman knocked the beam. Iron we've plenty. Heart, well that we carve ourselves. She flashed a grin and returned to work. Ghost whined softly. Jon knelt, scratching the thick fur behind his ears. Not yet, he whispered. The direwolf licked his glove, restless. After midday, Jon made the rounds. He waded through knee-deep drifts past tents, where Northmen sharpened axes. Past an ice-rimmed trench where Massey's archers tested fletching. Past a circle of free folk driving fresh stakes. Each clan offered some salute. Raised fists, murmured king, a few tears glistening in beards. He halted at the healers' tents, where Glover men stitched a Karstark trooper mauled by an elk 8 days earlier. They looked up in awe as he entered. One healer, a graying Woodfoot woman, bowed her head. Good supplies now, Your Grace. Needle and wine. We'll save more. Nan? That is worth more than crowns, Jon said, and meant it. When he emerged, snow had begun again, flakes swirling. He watched men hauling bundles of oak to feed tower fires. A far cry from Castle Black's hall lines, yet the rhythm comforted him. A raven swooped overhead, black against white, wings flashing. It alighted on a post near Jon and croaked. Little Ned, little Ned, little Ned. Jon's heart stuttered. 3 years past the bird had followed Bran around Winterfell, mimicking the old steward's scold. Ghost bristled, uneasy toyed. Before Jon could react, the raven launched skyward and vanished over the trenches. The omen lingered like icy breath. Jon turned south toward the riverside, where Stannis kept quarters separate from the staff tents. Outside the king's lean-to, Melisandre stood barefoot on packed snow, red silks brushing her ankles. Steam rose faintly from where her feet touched ice, as though the ground itself recoiled. The shadow grows, she said without greeting. I smell it in every flake. Jon halted, battle-axe in hand from an earlier inspection. You speak in riddles, while men hammer stakes. Offer Northmen fire instead, priestess, not whispers. Mind. Her smile curved like a crescent wound. Your men wield axes. Mine wields flame. She extended a hand. The ruby at her throat pulsed. I could show you? Spare me flames? Jon snapped, startling himself with the edge in his voice. He exhaled. When the siege begins, swords and arrows matter more than visions. Without vision, you will see only blades, never the hands guiding them. The ruby dulled. But I shall not press you. Events will. She stepped aside, letting him pass. Inside the king's shelter, Stannis sat on a low stool, maps spread across his knees. Jon ducked beneath the oiled hide flap. "More ravens, Jon?" the king asked. "A strange one. Croaking Bran's old name for me." He relayed the tale. Stannis' mouth twitched. "Ravens bring messages. Sometimes the sender is not a man." He traced a river on parchment. "The flints accept your call. They gather in the wolf's wood with tall-heart remnants." Relief sparked, but Jon kept voice level. "And the Umbers?" Silent still. "But word comes the bastard of Bolton raided last hearth, and took hostages. Fear muzzles, Greatjon's kin. Nyorn Sal." Jon's chest tightened. "We have to break that muzzle. First we crack the castle." Stannis rose, cloak of black fox falling about him. "Snow deepens. Engaging now risks bogging engines. Yet waiting seeds initiative. You learned at the wall. Surprise unclenches jaws. Then we strike soon." Stannis nodded. "Tomorrow at dusk, we assault the south gate in faint, massy leads. At nightfall, the trebuchets will loose on the larders and kennels. Half a night's barrage might starve their courage." Jon frowned. "A direct assault risks heavy losses. A king cannot hoard men when winter already robs them. But if you propose another way..." Jon crouched, stabbed a blade tip into the map. "There. The hunters keep postern. Old Maester Lewin once told me its stones loosen every thaw. A team could pry blocks, slip inside." Stannis considered. "How many men?" "A dozen, no more. Silent and quick. Once within, open the east gate. Our riders surge before Bolton can react." "Who leads?" Jon's answer came without thought. "I do." Stannis' stare measured him like weights on a scale. At last. "Very well. Choose your wolves." "When?" Night settled, heavy with drifting snow. Jon summoned men one by one. Lyanna Mormont's cousin Helly, a spare-boned archer. Dunstan Flint, whose father had died at the Red Wedding. A grizzled spear wife named Siv, who once followed Magnor Steer. Small Paul's brother Hal. Silent since the day mutineers cut Paul down at Craster's Keep. Each accepted without hesitation, though their eyes betrayed fear and grim pride. They gathered at the eastern sally tent, away from prying glances. Jon laid out charcoal sketches of Winterfell's wall, marking towers, patrol arcs, murder holes from memory. He pointed to the Hunter's Keep spur. "We scale here. Ghost Scouts first. Siv and Helly follow, secure the parapet. Flint and I pry the weak stones. Once inside, we clear the stair and unlatch the postern. Hal slips down, opens the east gate chain. At first bell, Manderley's van rides hard. We roll their gate before they can mount the culverin." They all nodded. Helly twirled an arrow between fingers. "What of Ramsay's dogs?" Jon's jaw clenched. "I vift for them." He patted a satchel of smoked boar laced with dream wine. "They'll sleep through the howling." Siv grunted approval. "Good." We slit throats quiet. Preparations consumed the afternoon. Buckles muted with felt. Furs turned inside out for camouflage. Crampons fitted to boots. Jon visited the healers' tents again, leaving a pouch of silver stags. "Payment," he said. "For split skins, come morning." The Woodfoot woman wept into her apron. Coin did not often come before wounds. Ghost vanished at dusk to scout. Jon waited outside his own small tent, watching breath coil upward. He thought of the wall, of Sam's books, of the simple comfort of a steaming bowl in the common hall. Those luxuries felt ages distant. He wondered if he would see them again. A figure approached, Davos Seaworth, fresh from his ride, cloak powdered white. He handed Jon a sealed roll. "Reed clans ride too," he said. "And Ricewell men pledge neutrality." Jon cracked wax. Raid Howland Reed's crabbed scrawl. "The Crannog sings for the wolf. Spears in the mist. A king not bound to southern chains." He folded it gratefully. Davos studied Jon's gear. "You lead the climb then?" "Aye." "You ever scaled Winterfell's walls before?" "Not from the outside." The Onion Knight smiled grimly. "I served with smugglers who'd fish across a chain-strung harbor in pitch dark for onions. I learned. Always promise yourself one bright thing if you live to see dawn. What will yours be?" Jon thought. Laughter in Winterfell's hall. Children chasing Ghost. He pictured Sansa, Bran, maybe Rickon grown tall. His chest warmed. "And you?" "A quiet seat by the sea," Davos said. "With boys neither starved nor beaten by war." His eyes shimmered, then cleared. "Nay, the seven. And whatever gods guard wolves, see us both to our bright things." They clasped forearms. Davos departed. Snow-muffling footfalls. Jon watched until darkness swallowed him. At last Ghost returned, muzzle dusted white. He circled Jon thrice, then trotted east. The path was clear. Jon slipped the direwolf a strip of dried lamb, more ritual than sustenance, then gathered his companions. They moved like shadows through camp, past sentries that recognized their purpose, and offered soft salutes, past rows of sleeping men who would wake to horns and steel. As they reached the perimeter, Jon caught the distant, rhythmic clack of trebuchet arms being drawn down, masked by thick cloth to hide the sound. Zegalines lived, breathed, stretched. The world outside camp lay blank as parchment. No moon cut through cloud, snowflakes blurred vision. They walked single file, each following the ghostly whirl of Ghost's tail. Jon led, counting heartbeats, orienting by childhood memory. The scent of the wolfswood, the faint rise where old Nan once swore giants buried a treasure. He felt Winterfell before he saw it. A shadow within shadow, a darker line against a night without edges. Torches sputtered along battlements, figures paced, tiny orange specks. They halted in a shallow dip less than 100 yards from the wall. Jon knelt, lifted his helm, breathed the air. Even now, Winterfell smelled of alder smoke and earth warmed by hidden pools, a smell that made his eyes sting. He whispered the plan again, barely a breath, and the party fanned out. Ghost vanished forward with Sieve. Pause, whisper silent. Jon followed minutes later, crouched low. The climb proved harder than he remembered. Ice ribboned the stone, filling every handhold with slick glass. But the dislodged mortar at Hunter's Keep was real. Old frost fractures widening into finger gaps. Jon wedged dagger blades, hauled himself upward with slow precision. Snow filled his collar, melted down spine. He dared not look left where the rampart fire danced. At the top, he hooked gloved fingers onto the parapet and eased chin over. Siv already knelt behind a crenelle, bow drawn. A Bolton sentry slumped 5 paces off, arrow shaft buried beneath ear. No sound, no alarm. Ghost crept by, heading further down the walkway, teeth bared in silent snarl. Helly joined them breathlessly. Together they lashed rope, lowered end for Flint and Hal. Within moments, all 6 crouched behind Merlin's. Jon signaled. Siv and Helly slipped north, knives ready for patrolling guards. Flint produced a prying bar crafted from a reforged anchor, fitted it into the cracked stone of the keep's corner. Jon braced opposite. Muscles screamed as they levered. The block shifted with a crunch of ice. Again. Again. At the third pull, the stone slid free, silent except for grit. A gap yawned large enough for a man. Jon ducked inside, landing in a narrow hallway, cobwebbed and dim. He sniffed. Damp rat musk, distant tallow. The Hunter's Keep had been boarded years. Bolton patrols rarely bothered. He eased forward, Longclaw unsheathed. Footsteps behind signaled Hal's entry. The corridor ended at a trapdoor. Jon hefted and cracked it open. Stairs wound downward, torchlit from below. Voices drifted. 2 guards complaining of frozen toes. Jon exchanged a glance with Flint, then ghosted down the stairs. At the mid-landing he paused, peered. The guards leaned on spears near a side door, backs to him. Flint slid opposite. Jon raised fingers. 3, 2. He sprang. Long claws pummel cracked skull. Flint's blade kissed throat. Both bodies lowered without more than a grunt. Hal slipped past, following Jon's whisper, "East Gate winch." The stair opened onto a gallery. Jon led Flint along it, soles muffled with sacking. Candlelight wavered from a chamber ahead, kitchen stores, by the smell of onions and lard. Mice skittered. They crossed quick, reached the narrow turn toward the postern. Jon's heartbeat roared. At the postern arch, a single dog lay curled. Jon cursed softly. They'd expected men, not this half-starved beast. He fished the boar meat, tossed it. The dog lifted its head, sniffed. Tail thumped once. It nosed the morsel, chewing greedily. Dreamwine would do its work. Jon eased the latch. Wood groaned, but the wind covered. Outside yawned a snow-washed ditch, silent save distant camp noises. Flint remained as rear guard, while Jon padded back to find Hal. He located him at the gatehouse stair, slumped, but breathing, nerves taut. Together, they crept to the winding platform. The chain wheel loomed, teeth caked in rust. Jon breathed deep and began to turn. Each click sounded thunderous. Twice he froze, listening. The castle slept, or pretended. The gate eased upward inch by inch, enough to admit a rider. Hal slipped away to signal with lantern shutter. 3 flashes toward the gloom where Manderley's van lurked. Jon descended, clasped Flint's shoulder. Time. They retraced to the parapet where Siv and Helly waited, faces pale with cold and tension. A distant horn moaned, a Bolton alarm echoing from the far wall. Too late, Jon thought. Hoofbeats thundered beyond the trees. Lanterns bobbed like a chain of fireflies, then burst into view. Manderley cavalry, trident banners snapping. They galloped straight for the yawning east gate. Lances lowered. Jon's blood sang. Bolton shouts erupted. Crossbows twanged from towers. One rider pitched sideways. But the first horses crashed through, hooves striking cobbles with triumphant clang. Behind them surged footmen, Stormlander pikes, free folk axes. The night split with screams and the clangor of blades. Jon's team loosed signal arrows, blue cloth streamers, to mark their perch. Within minutes, ropes hissed. More Northmen scaled the same breach. The parapet crowded. Jon led them toward the interior stair, intent on seizing the battlements before Bolton defenders could rally. Chaos gripped Winterfell's yard. Torches flared, illuminating churned snow-stained crimson. Kennel doors hung ajar. Half-drugged hounds snarled at invisible foes. Panic howls rose from servants fleeing across bridges. From the great keep, a horn blared, manic, cutting through din. Jon vaulted stairs 2 at a time, entered the yard as Manderley spearmen formed shield wall against a knot of Bolton sellswards. He plunged into the melee, Longclaw's Valyrian edge shearing a mailed arm. Ghost appeared at his side, crimson-mouthed, eyes burning. Together, they carved a path to the well where Davos now directed reinforcements pouring through. "Gatehouse secure," Davos shouted. "Postern still open," Jon answered, parrying a strike. Pushed to inner ward. Horns brayed again. Bolton, this time. Flames climbed the roof of the Hunter's Keep. Defenders attempted to burn the tower rather than lose it. Sparks spiraled into snow. Jon saw Helly loose arrows into windows. Saw Flint drag a wounded comrade clear of a collapsing beam. The battle blurred. A young Bolton knight swinging a morning star, severed by Ghost's teeth. A free folk woman screaming curses in Skagos tongue while cleaving mail. A washerwoman kneeling over a fallen child amid trampled grain. Snow churned red. A new roar erupted. Iron portcullis crashing. Ramsay Snow appeared on the balcony above the great hall, flanked by dusky men in boiled leather. His grin shone shark white. He raised a flayed man banner, then tossed something over the rail. A severed hand. It thumped in the slush before Jon's boots, rings on 2 fingers. Connington? No, Karstark. Rage recoiled like a bowstring in Jon's chest. "Come take me, Snow." Ramsay's voice carried eerily clear. "I have your kin's bones on my walls." Jon's answer was a thrown torch. The brands burnt along the courtyard anyway. The torch soared, struck the balcony rail, and shattered embers across Ramsay's boots. The bastard recoiled, snarling. Battle surged. Ramsay's men tried to form ranks, but Manderly pressure split them. From the rear, Stannis' storm guard poured in, led by Justin Massey, banners streaming. The courtyard grew a whirlpool of steel. Amid the chaos, Jon spotted movement at the first-floor gallery. A pale girl darting. No, a woman. Hood falling to reveal ripples of auburn as she guided two small figures behind a pillar. Sansa? Jon's pulse stuttered. He shoved toward them, ghost at heel. Bodies pressed, blocked. Ramsay bellowed orders. Arrows hissed. He fought furious, gaining a dozen feet. But a troop of Dreadfort veterans slammed in, axes low. Jon blocked, countered, killed, took a glancing blow that rang helm like a bell. When he cleared space again, the gallery lay empty. Ghosts scented the air. Circled confused. A horn of thicker brass cut through din. Stannis signal. Jon turned to see the king astride a black courser at the archway. Sword raised, Melisandre's red banner streaming behind. Stannis drove forward like a wedge. Knights close. Jon rallied to him, carving lane. Men shouted, "North," others, "Stag." Something greater than either word carried them. They reached the great hall doors even as Bolton men slammed timbers across from within. Ramsay vanished into shadows. Stannis dismounted, slapped his reins to a squire, seized a poleaxe. "Break it," he ordered. Jon joined, shoulder to timber, battering with axe butt. From behind came Manderly and Flint, heaving. At the fourth blow, wood splintered inward. Jon hurled himself through the gap. Inside, heat smothered, braziers blazed. Tapestries slashed, lay smoking. Ramsay stood atop the dais, curved blade dripping, eyes wild. Beside him knelt a man in maester's gray, trembling. Two crossbowmen flanked. "You're late for supper," Ramsay sneered, raising the blade. "Shall we carve the roast?" He pressed steel to the maester's throat. Jon advanced, blade high. "Release him. Be gay. Bark like your mutt." Jon's teeth clenched. He sensed Stannis at his shoulder, the king's presence a furnace. Ramsay chuckled, jerked his head. Crossbows loosed. Jon pivoted. One bolt grazed his vambrace, the other embedded in a Manderly man behind. Ghost leapt, crashing a bowman into a brazier. Flames whooshed, engulfing tapestry. Ramsay danced backward, dragging the maester. Stannis roared, charged, poleaxe flashing. Ramsay hurled the maester forward as a shield and fled through a side archway. Jon vaulted the dais after him, ghost streaking. They plunged into a corridor reeking of dogs and burned hair. Ramsay sprinted, surprisingly light. Jon pounded after, boots skidding on rushes. Behind, battle boomed like thunder. Ahead, flickering torchlight guided. Ramsay ducked through an oaken door. Jon followed into chill. The kennels. Dogs yelped, half mad from fire and scent of blood. Ramsay whirled, slashing at leash ropes. Snarling hounds sprang. Jon sidestepped the first, skewered a second. Ghost barreled into a mastiff, teeth at throat. Ramsay laughed, vaulted a pen, seized a pitchfork. "Come, bastard, let's dance." He thrust. Jon parried, felt splinters spray. He cut, but Ramsay vaulted back. Dog cages crashed as animals flung themselves. Wood splintered. Ramsay kicked open a rear door, fled into night. Jon pursed lip. He let Ghost finish a snarling brindle, then sprinted. Outside, the godswood lay silent, but for distant clash. Snow-laden branches glowed blue in torchwash. Ramsay darted between weirwood roots, eyes to every shadow. Jon slowed. Senses stretched. Wind sighed. A flicker. Ramsay spinning. Pitchfork aimed. Jon ducked, thrust upward. Longclaw pierced greaves, bit thigh. Ramsay shrieked, stumbled. Jon kicked, sending him sprawling against the heart tree. Blood spattered white bark. Ramsay bared teeth. "Finish it, Stark. Blame me, or do you northern fools still cling to honor?" "Honor," Jon said, cuts deeper. He leveled Longclaw. Yield. Yield? After I peeled women like apples. Ramsay laughed wetly. I'll yield their faces. Jon stepped, blade poised for hilt strike to temple, then stopped. From the corner of his eye, a child watched. A stable boy, maybe 10, clutching a broken halter, eyes huge, cheeks tear-slick. He had seen enough horror. Jon could not spill more blood before him. Ramsay saw the hesitation, thrust knife hidden at boot. Jon swatted it aside, but Ramsay lunged, teeth bared. Ghost intervened, jaws clamping on Ramsay's wrist, crunch of bone. Ramsay screamed, dropped blade. Jon slammed pommel into his skull. The bastard sagged unconscious. Jon exhaled hard. He bound Ramsay's wrists with leash rope, then hoisted him upright. The boy had vanished. Ghost limped, blood streaking flank. Jon knelt, checked the wound. Superficial. Good wolf, he whispered. He dragged Ramsay through the Godswood archway. The yard beyond pulsed with red torchlight and victory roars. Bolton banners burned in pyres, Manderley horns sounded triumph. Snow still fell, yet within Winterfell walls it met flame and hissed away. Men parted as Jon hauled the bastard of Bolton forward. Stannis stood at the hall doors, Melisandre behind, her gaze bright as new fire. The castle is ours, Stannis proclaimed, voice carrying over crackle and cheer. Eyes flicked to Ramsay's limp form. And so is its butcher. Jon released the rope, straightened. Weariness washed heavy. The climb, the fight, the chase had drained him. But inside, a strange hollow yawn. Winterfell stood again, yet Winterfell was broken. Dawn crept pale over the battlements, revealing carnage and victory intertwined. Jon walked among his men, sharing clasped hands and quiet nods. He knelt by fallen Manderley boys, by Karstark cousins, marking each for proper burial. He found Flint comforting a wounded Civ, snow turning pink where arrow pierced her shoulder. He pressed her hand. You'll hunt again. By the well, Davos splinted a horse's foreleg himself, muttering soft prayers. Jon crouched, thanks unspoken but understood. They shared a tired smile. As light strengthened, townsfolk crept from cellars. Gray-haired smith, baker's wife, children clinging to cloaks. They beheld direwolf banners unfurled atop ramparts, and fell weeping in the snow. Jon spoke to as many as he could, voice rough, assuring bread and blankets. Mid-morning saw preparations for Ramsay's judgment. Stannis convened his captains in the courtyard before the burned set date. Ravens circled above, drawn by scent of blood. Ramsay, wrists bound, now conscious, glowered at all. Frost rimed his hair. 2 knights held him kneeling. Stannis addressed the gathered houses. By right of conquest and the treachery of Roose Bolton, traitor to his king and to the north, the Dreadfort line is forfeit. Let the bastard's doom stand warning. Ramsay spat. You're no king. Tommen sits the throne. Jon stepped forward. Tommen did not feel your knives. He turned to the crowd. How shall the north judge its butcher? A low murmur rose. Voices calling for flaying, hanging, dog-baiting. Jon raised a hand. We fought to end flaying. Let not justice mirror cruelty. He drew Longclaw, pointed at the headman's block. A clean end. Stannis inclined head. So be it. Ramsay struggled, face a mask of fury and fear. Jon recalled Bran's raven croak, and suddenly felt old beyond years. He approached as the knights forced Ramsay to the block. Ghost stood near, teeth bared. Jon met Ramsay's eyes. In them he saw no remorse, only madness. Any last words? Jon asked. Ramsay's mouth twisted. You'll never wear this castle's stones. They remember flayed skins. They remember my. Jon swung. Longclaw flashed and fell. Ramsay's words ended in silence, head rolling into snow. Crimson steamed. A collective breath escaped the crowd. Jon lifted the head by the hair, turned so all could see. Winterfell remembers, he said. He cast it onto the burning pyre that had once been a Bolton banner. Flames leapt greedily. Melisandre's ruby flared, but Jon ignored her. He sheathed Longclaw, knelt where snow met ash, and whispered a prayer to unnamed gods. Noon sun revealed a castle battered but free. Horns of Manderley and Serwyn boomed welcome as more columns arrived. Reed spearmen skulking from mist, Flint Hill men hooting, tall heart survivors bearing white weasel banners. They marched through the open gates, saluting their new king. Women wept, men slammed spear to shield. Jon stood upon the battlements beside Stannis as the banners flowed in. A hush fell when he raised his gauntleted hand. Words stuck. He, who had once practiced speeches to Ghost alone, now faced the north. "I am Jon of House Stark," he called, voice echoing off stone. "Son of Eddard, sworn to guard the living. I took black vows, and still I hold them. In my heart, if not my cloak, the wall stands, yet winter rides south. To face it, the north must stand as one pack beneath one banner. Not for crowns and boasts, but for hearths and children." Silence greeted him, heavy as the snow-laden sky. Then a voice cried, "The king in the north," Manderley's booming bass. Another joined. Flint shrill. Then hundreds. "The king in the north. The king in the north." It rolled like thunder, beating against battlements. Jon's throat tightened. Memories of Robb, crown gleaming, flickered. Ghost raised muzzle and howled. From every corner of Winterfell, other voices joined. Wolves freed from kennels, dogs, men. The sound knifed through clouds, an anthem of ice and blood. Stannis watched, expression unreadable, then inclined his head, the smallest of nods, but profound. Jon answered with equal gravity. Their alliance held, for now. That evening, feasting flames rose in the shattered hall. Bread and salt laid on trestles, barrels of ale tapped. Lords reconvened, bruises hidden beneath cloaks. Manderley musicians tuned strings. Free folk drummed on upturned buckets. Children too young to understand danced between stilts of charred beams. Jon sat at the high table reluctantly. Stannis at his right, Melisandre and Ember at the king's side. The seat at Jon's left remained empty. Sansa's face flickered in his thoughts until Davos sat, offering quiet companionship. Toasts rang. To Winterfell, to fallen heroes, to mothers who would sleep easier. Yet Jon drank little, mind turning to distant walls of ice and shadows stirring. Victory felt brittle, as though one loud cry might shatter it. When the torches guttered low, he slipped away. Snow drifted through gaps in the roof, settling on benches. He padded across the yard to the godswood. The fire-lit frenzy of feast faded. The heart tree waited, blood-red leaves shivering. Jon knelt before the face carved by his ancestors, smears of Ramsay's blood still staining bark. Wind sighed through branches. In the hush he thought he heard Ned's voice, low and steady. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. Jon bowed his head, tears burned hot on frozen cheeks. A presence stirred behind. He turned to find a figure wrapped in gray cloak, hood shadowing features. A gloved hand lowered the hood. Wild auburn hair spilled, framing familiar eyes. Older, sharper, but unmistakably Sansa's. Jon's breath caught. Sansa. His voice cracked like breaking ice. She stepped forward, tears gleaming. "Jon." Her whisper carried years of hurt and hope. She hesitated, then rushed into his arms. They clung beneath the heart tree as snowflakes fluttered. "I feared you lost," Jon murmured into her hair. "Ramsay kept me prisoner, but I escaped the chaos during the assault." She pulled back, eyes flitting to bark. "The old gods guided me to you." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "Winterfell is ours again. Not yet whole," she whispered. "But closer." Footsteps crunched. The hooded girl from earlier emerged, guiding a tall, shaggy boy. Rickon, older and fierce, shaggy dog patting giant black behind. Sansa's arm tightened around Jon's waist as brother and sister reunited. Rickon eyed him with wary pride, then grinned wolfishly. "Took your time," Rickon said. Jon laughed, a raw, shaking sound, and swept him into hug. The direwolves circled, Ghost and Shaggy, sniffing acceptance. In that circle beneath crimson leaves, the shattered Stark pack knotted again. threads reforged in snow and blood. Beyond the godswood walls, fire still burned, bones still ached, banners still trembled. The pink ladder had never flown. Ramsay's boasts died with him. Yet other threats stalked the storm. Roose Bolton at the Dreadfort, Freys thick as maggots at the Twins, a Lannister boy king clinging to a gilded throne, and above all, white shadows waiting in night. For this moment, though, Winterfell breathed with wolf hearts. Jon closed his eyes, listening to wind sift through leaves, to the soft growl of reunited direwolves, to the fragile cadence of hope. Snow fell, each flake a promise that though winter tightened its grip, the north would endure. And somewhere far to the north, beyond the wall, other eyes watched, pale and patient, marking the rise of a crowned wolf with a silent icy hunger that knew no banners and no mercy. SQL. Snow whispered across Winterfell's shattered roofs as a bleak dawn bloomed violet above the towers. Smoke from last night's victory feast curled skyward, carrying the scent of oak and rendered fat into a brittle, sub-freezing hush. Jon Snow, now acclaimed king in the north, though the mantle still felt foreign on his shoulders, stood on the battlements facing east, eyes narrowed where pink light bled over the horizon. Beneath him the courtyard was a hive of exhausted activity. Wounded borne toward the old maester's turret, fallen Bolton standards consigned to bonfires, barrels of Manderley grain stacked beneath new-hung direwolf banners. Every shape cast a long blue shadow across earth, crusted white. Ghost padded close, muzzle brushing Jon's gloved knuckles. The direwolf's flank bore a newly stitched gash, but his gait remained silently predatory. Jon scratched behind the ear, noting the soft whine, a reminder that yesterday's triumph had come dear. He turned as Davos ascended the stair, breath fogging in the dawn. "They're assembling in the Great Hall," the Onion Knight said. His normally calm voice carried a brittle edge born of sleepless hours. "Stannis wants counsel before the sun sits a spear's length overhead." Jon nodded. "Tell him I'll follow. I needed air." Davos's gaze searched the snow-soft distance. The smoldering shell of the Hunter's Keep, the gnarled silhouette of the Godswood, the crooked line of Dreadfort prisoners trudging toward makeshift pens. "The castle breathes again," he said quietly. "Aye," Jon answered, fingers tightening on rampart stone. "But every breath rattles. We've splinted a limb, not mended it." A caw split the chill. A raven alighted on the merlawn beside him. Ink-black eyes fixed Jon. Then the bird croaked a single rough word, "King," and fluttered away. A memory flickered, Maester Aemon's laughter echoing across the ice yard of Castle Black. Jon swallowed, then forced himself to follow Davos down the stair. The great hall remained roofless after Ramsay's fires, but men had dragged trestles beneath canvas tarps strung on timber poles. A ragged rectangle of lords and captains formed around the high dais, Stannis in black and crimson, Melisandre gleaming beside him like a lick of living flame. Wyman Manderley broad and sea-green, snowflakes caught in his beard. Old Arnulf Karstark blinking in torchlight as if vision faltered. Hair-shirted Gerald Mormont straight as a lance. Mage Mormont's eldest, Lyra, helm tucked under her arm, just in massy toil. Immaculate steel. Sansa stood near the dais's edge in a simple wool gown dyed stark gray, auburn hair braided with a strip of direwolf-embroidered ribbon. Rickon lurked at the periphery, one hand buried in Shaggy Dog's fur, wolf and boy equally fierce and wary. Jon crossed the rush-strewn floor, every conversation stilled. He climbed the dais, but took no seat, wooden or armored, choosing to stand between Stannis and Manderley, a bridge of ice between fire and tide. Horns of warm ale glinted on the table, but few drank. Stannis began without flourish. "Winterfell is won, yet Roose Bolton lives and commands 10,000 at the Dreadfort. The Freys hold the Twins and the crossing south. Lannister gold still oils swords from white knife to the neck. Our position is grave." "Less grave than yesterday," growled Wyman, thumping a meaty fist. "A stark banner flies again. Northern hearts answer that, not flayed men." "Hearts," Arnulf sneered softly. "Do not pierce plate. My ravens say Bolton rides for Moat Cailin, He means to choke us here and starve us out. Massey spread a map. Bolton controls the King's Road from the Dreadfort to the Neck. If he garrisons Moat Cailin, we cannot run wagons south, nor bring Reed's spearmen north in force. Metternich. John studied inked rivers and ridges. Then we break his throat before it closes. Manderley's fleet can land men behind the moat, seize the causeway towers. Reed's skirmishers strike from the swamps, cut him in two. Mira Reed stepped forward shyly yet firm. Father sends word. Greywater watch floats where need leads. Our boats already scout the moat's eastern mists. Manderley nodded. White Harbor can sail at dawn. Timber wolves on water, reeds in mud at Dekai. Flank Bolton and squeeze. Mendiso. Stannis considered. A daring cut. But if Bolton marches here first, he'll march, John said. But not yet. Reaving villages fattens his men and spreads dread. He's never rushed a kill. We exploit that. Davos cleared his throat. One thorn remains. The king in King's Landing. Tommen's decree named these Bolton's wardens. Even if we rout them, southern lords might brand us rebels. A rumble of discontent. Mira's brow furrowed. Lyra Mormont spat. Stannis' lips pressed thin. One bastard boy wields more honor than that gilded child and his dwarf mother. Tommen's red ends at Moat Cailin's stones. If he survives the turmoil of his own capital. Reports speak of high sparrows plucking crowns. Mars. John forced his shoulders back. Titles matter less than winter's shadow. The true enemy gathers above the wall. I know the tales sound mad, but I've seen them, dead men walking, cold that steals swords from hands. We must ready the north, not bleed it in petty wars. Murmurs rippled. Arnulf's cousin Herman scoffed, but Melisandre glided forward, red jewels blazing. What the young wolf speaks is truth. Ice deeper than mortal frost stirs beyond that wall. I feel its claw in every gust. She lifted pale, slender hands. Would you squabble while night rises? Lyra Mormont's voice broke the hush. The Mormonts have always heeded their old gods. If our king warns of white shadows, we'll carve them before we carve Bolton's. Most noble, Arnulf said. But a blade cannot strike two foes at once. A blade cannot, Sansa interjected, stepping to Joan's side, yet a pack can. Heads turned. Her cheeks flushed, yet she held their gaze. My brother would see the North united in purpose. Let us forge two hosts, one to break Roose Bolton before he tightens his noose, the other to rally men, rebuild grain stores, and fortify Moat Cailin against Lannister or Frey reprisal. Membercheese. Manderley's eyes crinkled with approval. Wisely spoken, Lady Sansa. Stannis set fists on the table. Division invites defeat. John answered softly. Trust works two ways, Your Grace. I ride with the strike host. You hold Winterfell with a second, its walls and my sister as stark presence. We risk much together. A long silence. Stannis' jaw flexed. Then, very well. He turned to Lyra. Bear Island's eye for terrain is keen. You ride with the wolves to Moat Cailin. She saluted with a grin like broken teeth. Plans unfurled through morning. Manderley ships provisioning at White Knife. Reed outrunners guiding Mormont scouts through fen paths. Blacksmiths pressed to mend shattered mail. Ravens dispatched to White Harbor, Last Hearth. Carhold, Barroton, the Fingers. Each scroll sealed with dire wolf wax. By midday, Sansa guided courtiers through the broken kitchens, instructing which hearthstones could be salvaged, which spiceries to seal against weevils. Rickon dragged Shaggy Dog at her heels, demanding to see the kennels. John found the pair later beside the collapsed library wing. Sansa coaxing Rickon to release a trembling stable girl he had cornered with wolfish curiosity. John crouched, offering the child a carved stag he kept from Davos. Color returned to her cheeks. Afternoon brought grim duties. John walked the charnel pits, blessing the dead. He insisted Bolton corpses be burned apart from the fallen Northmen. We lay no flayed spirits among ours. Some lords muttered waste of wood, yet the edict stood. Above the pyres, ashes of butcher and butchered, rose a single black column. yesterday's horror rendered into tomorrow's fertile snow. At each second horn, trumpets saluted approaching riders, car-holed men braving night roads to kneel for their king. Jon received their oaths beneath the weirwood, though fatigue blurred his words. They returned to campfire circles, singing old winter songs older than any crown, voices weaving through pines like lost ghosts come home. That night Jon tried for sleep in Ned's old solar, half the roof gone to stars. Wind rattled loose shutters. Sansa had laid new furs, but cold seeped through stone. He dreamt. A field of shattered lances beneath a pale aurora, Stannis and Roose locked in shadow duel, a great elk of ice trampling villages, Robb's crown melting into black water that swallowed Winterfell whole. He woke at Candlemark 4, breath white, ghosts snarling at unseen terrors. He rose. Sleep was done. Before dawn smeared the sky, the strike host assembled beyond the broken east gate. 2,000 foot, Mormont, Flint, Serwyn, Reed Marsh stalkers, barefoot on frost. 1,000 Manderley archers in sealhide cloaks. 500 horse, the remnants of Karstark and Glover light cavalry, with a dozen Stormlander knights under Justin Massey. Jon rode Windfoot, a rangy gray courser once stabled for Ramsay himself. Ghost paced ahead, a white standard more fearsome than any silk. Stannis joined atop his black destrier, flanked by Davos and Melisandre. No words passed until banners lifted and drums rolled. Then Stannis extended a gloved hand, iron-kneading fur at Jon's wrist. "Win fast," he said, voice scarcely louder than wind. "Or I win alone, and you return to ashes. Guard Winterfell." Jon answered. "Northmen dream of its hall. Do not douse that hearth." With a curt nod, the king wheeled to oversee fortification lines. Rickon ran forward, cheeks ruddy, and pressed an obsidian-tipped dagger into Jon's gauntlet. "Stab a monster," the boy said. Jon ruffled his hair, promising to return before the next snowfall, knowing snowfall was measured in hours, not days. They marched. Footprints scored the fresh powder into ragged script. Reed outriders guided them down, riverbeds glazed in black ice, across meadows buried thigh-deep, through thickets where frost-weighted branches drooped like chandeliers of crystal. At dusk of the first day, the advance columns skirted a hamlet gutted by Bolton foragers. Doors hacked, livestock throats slit, children's dolls skewered on spears as grisly markers. Manderley's men buried the slain while Reed scouts tracked bootprints south. Noon next day, they found fleeing smallfolk along King's Road. Families dragging sledges, cheeks hollow, recounting Roose's levies, seizing every able-bodied youth for pike lines. Jon ordered wagons commandeered from Ramsay's stores to feed them, setting pregnant women in covered carts meant for ballista bolts. On the third sunrise, sky bruised, wind ragged, they reached the southern fringe of the Wolfswood, where pines parted to reveal the sinuous smear of the shivering sea. Gulls cried over whitecaps. In the distance, sails flecked the horizon. A dozen, then 2 dozen. White Harbor's fleet, cresting swells like ice-staven wolves. Camps sprang on a frozen strand mottled with driftwood. Fires dotted the gloom. Scent of tar and sea cabbage mingled. Wyman Manderley himself came ashore, boots sloshing in slush, big belly shaking with laughter when Jon clasped forearm. "The North remembers," he rumbled. "The merman remembers how Starks once ruled salt and snow both." He presented a cask of pickled herring so large, 4 men bore it. "For your hosts' bellies, and maybe your horse." He winked. Jon could not help smiling. Knights' Council convened in a sailcloth pavilion staked among dune reeds. Maps weighted by drift stones, candles shielded from salt wind, voices low to foil gusts. The plan hardened. At first light, Reed Marsh boats row up hidden channels to cut pickets. Manderley fleet veers north under banners taken at White Knife, luring Moat Cailin south-facing towers to concentrate fire. Meanwhile, Jon's foot slogs through barrow mounds east of the causeway, emerges behind the moat just past midday. Massey's horse then charges the causeway proper, splitting any Bolton columns strung along the narrows. A decisive pincer if timing holds. Timing rarely held in the Barrowlands. Dawn brought a blizzard, sleet knifing sideways, obliterating landmarks. Reed scouts vanished into the white, returning with ice-crusting brows and news of Bolton outriders pushing further east than expected. Manderley captains fretted over sailcloth tearing in sudden gales. Jon stood mute in swirling snow, every draft a ghost shriek, and weighed risk against desperation. At length he called the captains. The attack proceeds. Snow cloaks us, he argued. Bolton expects clear west wind. We are storms made flesh. They marched, if lurching blind through waist-deep drifts counted as marching. Horses snorted steam, hooves sliding. Axemen leaned into gusts that toppled young pines. Reed guides tied ropes between waist belts, forming human chains reappear in white haze. Ghost alone ghosted ahead, fur blending with squalls like storm-bred legend. Hours lost meaning. Only numb feet, the constant lurch of wind, the raw rasp of breath against face wraps existed. Sometime near what should have been midday, the squall eased. Snow thinned to fluttering flakes, unveiling a gray afternoon, and the meandering snake of the causeway perhaps 2 bowshots distant. Moat Cailin loomed to the west. Ancient black stones, crooked towers squatting on mossy hillocks above the fen. Smoke columns spiraled from tar pits, where Bolton men heated oil. No horn sounded. The blizzard had muzzled watchful eyes. Jon signaled silence, then motioned archers forward. Manderley bows creaked, arrows loosed in long arcs. The fletching vanishing into mist to reappear hacking into wooden palisades. A cry rose from the southernmost tower. Drums beat frantically. Reed war horns answered, low crooning wails drifting from the swamp like mourners. From the north, ship horns howled as Manderley galleys slid into view, sails slack but advancing on inland tide. Chaos bloomed. Crossbow quarrels spat from battlements, pinging off driftwood shields. Jon's foot pounded across soggy tussocks, axes high. Karstark pikes extended, forming bristling hedgehogs as Bolton's spear lines stumbled from the moat's inner courtyard, unsure which threat to face. Massey's cavalry, hidden till now behind a ridge of peat banks, thundered onto the narrow causeway, splitting outrider ranks like birds scattering before a bear. Jon plunged into melee at the moat's eastern curtain where stones wept slime. Long claws Valyrian edge hissed through boiled leather, sending crimson ribbons across gray sky. Ghost launched at a shield bearer, jaws crushing collarbone dot. Reed knives flickered from behind reeds, hamstringing pikemen who never saw death until blood spurted. Manderley Marines scaled barnacle-slick ladders from flooding boats, singing bawdy shanties as they swept walkways with hooked bills. Yet Boltons fought like trapped stoats. Axes rang, oily fire slopped from parapets, igniting cloak hems. Jon's sleeve smoldered. He plunged arm into a puddle, then hacked at the dispenser's knee. Atop southern tower he glimpsed Arnulf Karstark's banner of sunburst, proof the other flank succeeded. Massey's riders drove lances through startled men still belting armor. Within an hour resistance broke. Horns bleated surrender. Jon's lungs burned, arms shook. He climbed the central keep where Bolton captain, gaunt man with frost-bitten nose, knelt, grudgingly offering rust-pitted sword. Jon accepted, snapped the blade across a parapet, hurled shards into mire. Your men live if they yield, he told the garrison. Flaying ends today. Then he ordered Reed scouts to bind prisoners, Manderley carpenters to shore collapsed ramparts, and Karstark riders to sweep for stragglers. Sundown spilled amber across barrow lands, painting dead and living alike in molten light. Fires crackled in busted hearths. Smells of fish stew floated from reed baskets. Wounded moaned while healers stitched. Woodfoot poultices steaming pungent. Jon sat on a lichen-encrusted stone within the keep's hollow, ash clinging to hair. The cost tallied: 200 Northmen, 40 riders, a dozen reeds, 20 Manderley archers. Less than feared, more than hoped. Every name scored his heart. Messages flew north on reed crowboats and south by mounted courier. Moat Cailin secure, Bolton rout. Jon sealed each with the direwolf stamp. Before the courier left, he quietly added a note for Sansa. Alive, hold hope. And one for Stannis, The road stands clear. Ride or send grain. But he debated long before affixing the stag with heart seal beside direwolf. Some alliances needed ink as well as blood. Night deepened. Jon walked battlements alone. The storm had scoured stars clean, revealing a luminous river across the heavens. His breath fogged. Exhaustion settled like heavy cloak. Yet beneath bone-deep ache simmered a spark. They had struck first, cut Roose Bolton's reach in half. Still, the Dreadfort remained. So did Frey's, Lannisters, cold shadows beyond the wall. Footfalls approached, Meera Reed, cloak damp and eyes bright. "We buried your dead by barrow fire," she whispered. "Old songs speak of guiding spirits home." Jon nodded thanks. She hesitated, then added, "Father dreamed green dreams last moon." He saw the neck flood with white fog, and shapes moving within. He feared it meant walkers breaking the wall. Nestjen. A chill deeper than wind sliced Jon's core. "If the dead march, every gate matters. We must send men back north, warn Castle Black." Meera's gaze flicked to ghostly horizon. "I'll guide them." Plans spun again. Messengers, escorts, ravens trained to fly across the Bay of Seals when storms abated. But fatigue weighed. Jon dismissed Meera to her rest and leaned on mossy stone, eyes tracing constellations Robb once recited. Above, the sword of the morning constellation glittered. Below, torches bobbed along the causeway, escorting wagons south to White Harbor. Somewhere far behind the dark pines, Stannis fortified Winterfell. For one fragile night, the north followed twin flames of wolf and stag. Dawn of the fifth day painted the neck pale rose. Jon's host readied eastward march, toward Barrowton first, then Dreadfort. Scouts reported Roose gathering at Flint's Finger instead, uncertain the Moat's fate. Good. Misinformation would bleed his resolve. But as Jon oversaw supply tally, a black-feathered raven soared low, cawed, alighted on his saddle, scroll dangling. Wax bore the stag-inflamed sigil. He unfurled it. Words terse as Stannis' temper. Winterfell breached. Frey host 30 leagues south, Dotawat. Lannister gold behind. I hold walls. Bring fire or return ashes. Jon cursed. Roose Bolton could wait. Freys crawled north sooner than expected. Baggage trains funded by Casterly Rock. If Stannis fell, Winterfell fell, and the North's heart died anew. He called council at once. Arguments shook the keep. Chase Bolton while advantage held, or wheel north to relieve Winterfell. Jon listened, jaw tight, then raised a hand. Stark blood beats in those stones. The North fights for them. If we let Freys retake the castle, every gain unravels. Manderly pounded fist. Freys flayed kin at the twins. My oaths are to Stark vengeance. Reed emissaries nodded solemn. Massey deferred. I ride where my king commands. Choice crystallized. March north overnight, ride hard with cavalry ahead. Leave a garrison at the Moat to block Bolton. Jon assigned Arnulf Karstark and Meera to hold, Manderly's second son Wylis to coordinate resupply. He left half the archers and reeds. Swords he could spare, time he could not. By noon, Windfoot thundered across the causeway, hooves sending slush fanning. Snow began again, thick as last campaign. But they rode with urgency. Riders wrapped hoarfrost hair around faces, banners stiffened to icy spears. Ghost loped tirelessly, bounding marsh pools, white blur against white world. Nightfall brought a makeshift bivouac in hollow oaks, but rest felt traitorous. Horns sounded before dawn, and the host galloped north again. On the second dusk, a crimson bloom on the northern sky betrayed fires. Winterfell's fields aflame. Panic clawed Jon's gut. They pressed through dark torches hooded, stumbling men over rutted paths. At sunrise, they crested a snowy ridge and beheld the Frey lines. 8,000 foot, 2,000 horse. Siege carriages rumbling, baggage tents bearing twin tower standards. They had ringed Winterfell in 3 semicircular camps, battering rams dragged near the west gate. Frey outriders spotted Jon's vanguard seconds later. Trumpets brayed alarm. Jon surveyed enemy disposition. Fresh trenches half dug. Siege towers incomplete. They expected more days unopposed. Perfect. He turned to Massey. Cavalry flanks their left. Cut supply wagons. Manderly archers fire volleys from tree line. Foot follow me straight at their heart. Ghost harry any cavalry that breaks loose. We cut before they form. No rousing speech followed. Snow lanced too hard for theatrics. Horns bellowed. Karstark trumpets answered from rear. Cav surged down slope, crashing into dazed Frey detachments, still latching pauldron straps. Manderly arrows fell like winter hail, punching into kettle helms. Jon's infantry roared, axes wind-milled. Long claw flashed argent, singing a rasp of Valyrian dialect older than towers. Frey cohesion shattered. Wagons burst aflame, spilling flour and smoking bacon. Panic rippled. Yet from the center, a knot of armored knights rallied around blue-mantled riders, Sir Ryman Frey's personal guard, forming wedge to spear Jon's forward axes. Jon spurred Windfoot, met them head-on. Steel clanged. A spear glanced off his gorget, bruising collarbone. Ghost clamped onto a destrier's leg, sending horse and knight tumbling in gore. Jon carved into the wedge, long claw biting chain, sliding between ribs. Frey standard-bearer toppled headless, blue banner dipped. Foot pressed behind him, hacking at exposed flanks. Ryman himself charged, mace whirling. Jon ducked, slashed the horse's belly. Beast reared, screaming. Massey's riders crashed from the flank, lances skewering mail. Within moments, Frey's center folded like wet parchment. But battle's tide shifted again. New trumpet calls to the north. Lannister read. Cavalry detachment of 200 men at arms, detached from snowy rise under lion banners, cutting toward Manderly archers. Bolts from arbalests gleamed. Jon cursed. Several Manderly lines wavered. Before he could redirect, horn blasts echoed from Winterfell's gate. Stannis' stag banner erupted, gates clanging wide. Northmen poured out. Glover remnants, Barrowton men, wooden-shielded Stormlanders. They slammed into Lannister flank like frozen tide hitting cliff. The lion banners bent. Jon sized momentum, sending a runner to Arnulf's archers perched on the ridge they'd just descended. A cascade of arrows rained on Frey rear ranks. Survivors threw spears and fled south in chaotic rout, directly into Massey's waiting horse. Mid-battle snow thickened again, muting screams. When flakes thinned hours later, Frey banners burned in pyres. Lannister detachments surrendered, a score dead, the rest disarmed. Jon rode blood-streaked Windfoot through carnage, searching for casualties. He found Manderly's eldest nephew, sprawled, chest crushed, and knelt, whispering comfort, though the boy saw only heaven now. Justin Massey limped with arrow lodged in thigh, but grinned defiant. Ghost bore fresh cuts, yet tail wagged on seeing Jon approach. Near West Gate, Stannis waited, helm off, beard laced with ice. They studied each other without words. Then Stannis inclined head slightly. Melisandre watched from gate arch, ruby pulsing attuned to unseen heartbeat. Jon dismounted, boots sloshing pink slush, and clasped the king's forearm. "Winterfell holds," he said. "Together." Stannis' crooked smile dazzled like sunlight off frost. "Together," he echoed, grudging yet sincere. They convened triumph council in the hall's ragged shell, while healers bound wounds and prisoners scooped slop with trembling ladles. Sansa joined, cheeks smudged with ash, having led women in dousing fires with snow-packed barrels. Rickon slept curled with Shaggy Dog by hearth ruins. The Frey prisoners knelt, Sir Ryman among them, awaiting judgment. "Your house broke guest right at the twins," Stannis told him, voice cold. "Now you breach my siege lines. Treason doubled merits death." Ryman trembled. "I acted under Walder's orders, which no longer hold weight," Sansa said, stepping forward like dawn breaking. "Lord Walder betrayed the realm for coin. His crimes cry to heaven." She turned to Jon. "The North remembers. Let us answer. Jon's expression hardened. He raised long claws slowly, so torchlight slid along black ripples. Cailin. Dot. Ryman sobbed but dropped. Jon passed sentence, swung clean. Sword edge hissed across still air. The hall fell silent, save crackle of distant bonfires. Justice. Swift and cold. Night's end found Jon on eastern ramparts again, this time Sansa at his side wrapped in thick direwolf cloak. Winter's moon blazed above, shimmering across unbroken snowfields where Frey and lion banners now lay trampled. Below, campfires ringed Winterfell like new constellations, men singing victory laments. "Father would scold me," Jon murmured, tracing Longclaw's pommel. "I have worn crowns, broken vows, swung heads, yet no joy." Sansa slipped chilled fingers into his. "Father taught us justice, not celebration. But he also taught hope." She pointed westward, where the wall's illusionary lines shimmered under moon. "You fight for that." Jon followed her gaze. In his mind, the wall loomed, silent sentinel trembling under unseen claws. "Next we must turn north. Dead things move. Winterfell will stand ready," she promised. "We'll sow fields come thaw, forge spears, mend roofs. And if the dead break roofs," she angled a smile, fierce as Lyanna of legend, "then we fight on broken rooftops." Ghost murmured low, nose lifting to night wind. Jon sensed it too, a tremor in distant dark, like a drumbeat under frozen earth. An omen, or perhaps the far-off heartbeats of ice wights stirring. Jon squeezed Sansa's hand. "Tomorrow we send ravens to every holdfast. Gather dragonglass, torchwood, muster every able heart." Sansa nodded. "And what of Roose Bolton?" "He will come," Jon said. "But the north stands lit, impossible to snuff. When he rides into a storm forged of his own cruelty." He paused. "Yet even his fall will not end this tale." A hush descended. Snowflakes drifted again, soft as moth wings, brushing hair, lashes, sword. Jon closed his eyes, inhaled the brittle air carrying scents of pine, soot, blood, and something older still, earth waiting beneath white shroud to bloom green once more. When he opened them, first light bruised the eastern sky. A new day, same war, wider horizon. In the courtyard below, horns trumpeted reveille. Manderly cooks stoked iron cauldrons. Archers stretched frost-stiff arms. During the hush between notes, Jon heard a distant, chilling echo. A horn of 3 blasts, far away, somewhere north of the wall, where no living horn should sound. His blood froze. "You heard?" he whispered. Sansa frowned, but he was already vaulting the stair, cloak snapping. He raced across rampart, found Davos emerging from tower. Their eyes met. Both had served the watch, both knew the code. 3 blasts. The others? Jon barked for ravens. For every captain, for Melisandre. Ruby flickering like startled heart. The war for the north had been prelude. The true night began now. Above Winterfell, dawn's bruised light flickered, seemingly uncertain whether to rise at all.